Hello and welcome to our first video blog, which we're calling Not Another Book Review, where our guests will share concepts or ideas they have read about in books and applied in real life. So much like our approach to consultancy, theory is all very well and good, but it's the application that matters. Today, I'm joined by Oyindamola Sosanya, Business Change Manager, co-chair of One Housing Black and Minority Ethnic Network, host of the Bookmark Book Club, and self-confessed bibliophile and logophile. Oyindamola, welcome and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Rhiannon. I'm really excited to be on Not Another Book Review, because I've been on a lot of book reviews, so it's great to do a book review that isn't really a book review. So thank you, Rhiannon.
Excellent. So you've selected concepts from two different books to tell us about. Where would you like to start?
Okay, so I want to start from the first. So I'm thinking about two books that had the most profound effect on me, and not just that I read, but I actually applied, like you said, in 2020. And those two books were Essentialism by McKeown and The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. So I'll start with The Essentialism by Greg McKeown. So the general idea of the book, based on what the title is, that only a few things are actually vital to our goals and well-being. So, we have a myriad of things that we always think that we need to do, but what is absolutely essential? And what the main premise of the book is, you need to focus on those few essential things. And in other words, you learn to do better by doing less. So because you kind of focus on the stuff that is really important, you're doing those things that you really need to do in a better way. And some of the things that really stuck with me from the book that I actually applied in 2020, as we all know, 2020 was a really, really difficult year for a lot of us. We were stuck at home and it felt like you had time, but quickly it became quite apparent, like the time that you thought you had, you didn't really have a lot of that. There were so many other things that were so much more important to us. We slowed down, but then we, as human beings tend to do, we weren't going out that much, but then we were having so many Zoom meetings, and then we were having so many things cropping up, and there were so many. I remember at the start of the lockdown, I literally had like social Zoom calls almost every evening. But what I applied in the book is I needed to think about the things that were less important in my life that I needed to cut out. And it also allowed me to be able to reject the notion that we can actually do everything. And it made me narrow down to my goals to say, and this was not just goals in a career perspective, but also in my personal goals. What are the most important things to me in my life? As is it family? And if it's family, what are those important things that we really need to do? So I'll give an example. I felt that it was really important for me and my family to eat together. It was something that we never used to do, especially when you're really busy. The kids will have their dinner and somebody else would have something else. But then I felt that it was essential to me, and that meant that we would have time together, to make meals together, do stuff together. And it meant that I had to cut out stuff. It meant that sometimes I didn't do those Zoom calls, because what was important for me was we needed to eat together. So essentialism is about choosing a direction and making great strides in things that matter the most. So what matters to you the most and what is absolutely essential in your life is similar to the 80-20 Pareto principle, which I learned from you, Rhiannon, is, what you get most premium, what you spend 80% of the time doing should, and what you spend 20% of your output should give you 80% of your result. So basically that's the premise of the book, as in is what is the most essential to you, and stick to those things, and then you'll be able to get much more output from those things because you're putting in more effort.
So it's learning to be comfortable with letting some things go, or
Yeah.
even saying no to some things, which
Yeah.
I imagine is very hard. A lot of us like to be yes people. A
Yeah.
lot of us like to make commitments to things.
Yeah.
And as you say, last year that became essential to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we all thought we'd have lots more time, we're saving on our commute, but the reality of things, well, for parents like you and me, like
Yeah.
homeschooling, and that extra time in the mornings to have
Yeah.
breakfast, and actually them being home earlier for
Yeah.
dinners and things like that, meant that we had to identify what was important and prioritize those above
Yeah.
and beyond everything else,
Yeah.
whether we're talking about our personal lives or whether we're
Lives.
talking about work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Another principle and concept that I kind of um, took on, and also was also similar to when I started being interested in the agile methodology, is constantly questioning and updating plans accordingly. So there needs to be a process where you look at, and I'm a big big fan of having to-do lists and having, being very, having, this is what I want to do, this is my plan and all of that. But I think one of the principles from the book was you need to have a process or a way, and it kind of lends itself to some of the other things, plan, do, check, act, which is you decide what's doing and what should be let go. And it needs to be a continuous iterative process. So it's having the mindset where you continuously question if the daily tasks are actually what doing. Are they value adding? If you look at something, it's like, why do I have to spend this time doing this same thing? Is there a way I can replicate this to make sure that I don't have to do this every morning? Is there a way I can replicate this to make sure I don't have to do this every afternoon? Can I, always having that ability to be able to question, to say, why am I doing this? As in, is this absolutely essential? He talked about something where he said, where the author said, if you put a list of things where you're able to say, I want to do this, and if you can't say I definitely have to do this, then it means that it's not really essential. Because if it's either I have to do it, or yeah, I don't really, if it's a maybe, yeah, then you don't really have to do it. So it can't be. There were some principles in the book that were a bit, it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be very difficult for a lot of us to do. He actually had a whole element of the book that talked about saying no and being comfortable to say no. It gave ideas on, sometimes when you say no, it doesn't necessarily mean you're actually saying an outright no. You could say things like, let me go think about it, pause before you say yes. His book spoke about, don't just be quick to say yes, as in pause and think about it before you actually say yes. So I think the overall premise of the book is, actually looking at our daily tasks. And, sometimes we get so bogged down in the tiny detail of tasks, but then we forget the bigger picture. And so essentialism allows you to look at the bigger picture and say, okay, what exactly are my goals? And we can apply this to work. We can apply this to everything that we do. We can apply this to projects that we're working on. What is essentially the reason why we're doing this? And is everything that I'm doing taking me closer to that goal? And if it isn't, then yeah, maybe we need to cut it out.
Brilliant. So it's a essentialism can be applied proactively and reactively.
Yes.
So proactively, where you look at things and you make conscious decisions to cut them out, but then reactively, as things come up during the day, during the week, where you're saying, actually, this isn't essential, I'm not going to do that, or yes, this is, I'm going to make that a priority. Very interesting.
It was a very good book. And I think, as I said, it was very impactful because it was one where I was able to apply, and I could see that I was thinking in a way. I wouldn't say, because he spoke a lot about essentialists, so he didn't just say essentialism. I don't think I'm an essentialist yet, quite yet, but there were some principles that I found quite interesting, and I found quite useful as well.
Excellent. So that was Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
McKeown, yeah.
Excellent. And we'll pop a little list on the screen at the end so people can see where they can get those books from.
Yeah.
Marvelous. Thank you. And your second concept?
Okay, so the second concept was from the book The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. So Ryan Holiday is like, he's studied the Stoics forever. He's written a couple of other books like Ego is the Enemy. He's written about the Stoics, and basically the principle is around how the Stoics in ancient Greece looked at obstacles. And 2020 was an obstacle. I remember in March 2020, right before we went into lockdown, I was one of those people who went through the change curve. I think I've even written about it once. I went through the change curve of, yeah, it's just a flu. And then I went to the denial stage of, yeah, people are just making a fuss about a flu. I was like, it's just nothing. And then I actually went through the whole gamut of emotions that you go through when all of this was happening. And it really, really hit me, because I remember when we got the letters to say, oh my God, I have to homeschool. I was like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of projects. I've got children. I can't do this. And so it was an obstacle that for me seemed insurmountable. As human beings, we don't like facing obstacles. We really think like, oh my God, I can't do this. But the premise of the book that really resonated with me in 2020 was, because we don't like facing obstacles, we kind of, have a really, really adverse reaction to them. And one of the things he spoke about, and I think he quoted Confucius, where he said, I think it was a Chinese proverb or something that says, within every obstacle, there's opportunity. So he gave some really, really good pointers in various parts of the book on how you actually face obstacles. You said one of the first concepts was alter the perception of the obstacle. So for me, altering the perception of the obstacle was, oh my God, I have to homeschool my children. I'm horrible at teaching and all of that. To alter the perception to, I get to spend much more time with my kids, as in when is the next time I'm ever going to be able to spend this time with my kids. Whenever I ever had the time to actually slow down this way and actually get to know them as individuals, because half the time I'm just trying to get to work, trying to get them to school, come back home. Yeah, we do have those times, but it was stolen times at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day. But now during the week, I can actually go on a lunchtime walk with my children at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As in, that is a great thing, and that's me getting to know them. My daughter's 11, so she's getting to that age where she is going to be a teenager soon. And teenagers don't like their parents, so this is a good time for me to develop a relationship with her. So that obstacle of, okay, I have to homeschool, I had to alter the perception of that obstacle. So when we look at our obstacles in the right light, we can reveal hidden possibilities that we can use to our advantage. So even though it was horrible, I'm still doing it at the moment and I'm still not great at it. I still had to homeschool, but I had to look at that particular obstacle and look at the things that I could actually get from it. So another thing he spoke about is learning to detach ourselves. And a lot of times our views of obstacles or our views of things are highly personal and highly subjective. When you look at a situation, you're going to look at it from the point of view of, oh my God, as in how this is affect me. It's the first thing you look at. It's the same thing. This is the reason why, as you said, and Brianna were in the same business. When you go into an organization and sometimes you're saying, oh, you need to make these changes, people automatically have a defense mechanism to say, oh my God, that means I have to learn that, or I have to learn a new way of working. And they just, it gets very subjective and personal. Sometimes it feels to them that it's an attack on them, on how they do things. But if in the obstacle is the way, what Ryan Holiday was saying is, if you can have a highly objective look at things, if you can remove your personal feelings from a situation and say, okay, you know what, let me look at this in a very, if I was talking to someone else, or if this was happening to someone else, what are the facts of the issue? And then it allows you to be able to reframe it, because emotional obstacles tend to blur our judgment. It makes it impossible to turn obstacles into advantage because you just keep on looking at the obstacle. And when you take yourself out of the consideration, it allows you to look at the bigger picture. You don't just see yourself. Even within what we do, sometimes a lot of teams just look at what they do because they're like, oh, this is what we need to do, but they're not quite clear on how what they do affects the whole organization, or that affects their customers as a whole. So you just see it as an obstacle. So if you can alter your perception of an obstacle, it allows you to be able to see the bigger picture. I think he also spoke about one or two other things. He spoke about also having the ability to know that you need to take actions to overcome them. So, it takes, he spoke a lot. There was a particular example he gave. I think it was a Greek hero, Demosthenes, that, he had to fight for his, I'm mixing up the stories now, but there was a particular story of someone who had to fight for his inheritance, and he was already severely disadvantaged. But then he had to make sure that he had the discipline and the consistency to keep plugging at what he needed to do. And again, it goes back to when we're trying to make changes, we're trying to do new things in our lives. Sometimes those things that seem like obstacles, we just need to have that discipline to keep on with it. So it was really profound for me, because I was able to take some of those principles, not just reading it in a book. And I read it in April. So I think it was just at the right time for me to read it, because we were just as in it was in the throes of the first lockdown, where I think this lockdown is hard, but the first lockdown was like, what's happening? Everybody, but for me, reading that book really altered my perception of all of the situations that were happening at the time.
Fantastic. And I know it's been a favourite here at Odessi as well. Becky Mitchard, one of our consultants, read it and promoted it to everybody.
Yeah.
And for anybody that's interested in learning more, there is a daily newsletter by Ryan called the Daily Stoic, which often quotes Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well worth it. The snippets of insight it gives you if you're not ready to read the full book just yet.
Yeah.
Marvelous.
That's good.
And whilst we're touching on homeschooling, apologies if anyone can hear a screaming toddler in the background. My husband and son are home and he's being homeschooled, and I think it's lunchtime and he's demanding his lunch. So please just ignore the background.
Noise. comedy.
Yeah. Marvelous.
I can hear mine as well, and I'm thinking as in, and I was looking as in, I was like, yeah, don't come in here now. Can you just be quiet for now?
You'd warn them, you know, but need a recording studio or something. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those insights and the concepts you've taken from books. I know you read 41 books, was it last year?
Yeah,
So,
42 actually. Sorry.
42. I got that by looking at Dami's blog. So if you're interested, Oyindamola has a blog which is called lifethroughmylenses.blog. We'll put the link up at the end. But it's fantastic because even though she says she does book reviews, they're not book reviews just reviewing the book. They always reflect on what she's learned as a result of them. So if you've enjoyed the conversation today, please give her a follow. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was really helpful. Again, check out Oyindamola's blog, lifethroughmylenses.blog, and we'll put the link up at the end. And thanks very much.